The first case of Ebola diagnosed in the U.S., sparking a public health scare and paving the way for what could be a legal nightmare, not only for the man accused of bringing the disease here after lying on a travel application, but for health officials facing this disease for the first time. Let's bring in Fred Tisi. He is a former federal prosecutor, and Arthur Aidala, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, and a Fox News legal analyst. All right, gentlemen, I hardly know where to start because there are so many different issues here. Liberian government are already suggesting that they're going to prosecute this guy potentially if he lives for lying on a travel document. But there are so many things along the way where people have responsibilities, hospitals have responsibilities. What do you think could be the flair here? Fred, I'll start with you. What could be the one legal nightmare that we have?
Well, there's a couple of legal nightmares. I think the guy lying on his form about having been exposed to the Ebola virus, I think that's a fairly serious charge. I mean, but as you know, the guy, quite frankly, probably doesn't really care. He's worried about saving his own life. You know, he checked into the hospital. They sent him home. Problem with Ebola is it originally presents as a common cold or as the flu. Correct. However, the guy is not a U.S. citizen. He's a Liberian, and I think that should have raised a red flag. And I think the hospital should be concerned.
If other people get sick, then you worry about these, civil suits against the hospital, that kind of thing. Okay, so we also now, Arthur, have the situation where the family is being quarantined.
Yeah, that's where
we have reports that they didn't want to do it. They didn't like being locked in there, and so now there's essentially a court order and a guard that's keeping
maybe
them
as a criminal defense attorney who focuses on search and seizure and having your liberty taken away, that's really where I focus. Obviously, look, there are laws on the books in Texas that this is absolutely legal, what they're doing. But if you think about it from a humanitarian point of view, the people who are in the apartment with him, they may not have been exposed at that point. So now you're locking them in and you're raising the level of the likelihood of them getting the virus. And now apparently they just sent over a truck to desanitize the place. I mean, and look, this is going to be driven by common sense. I think one thing that would make sense would be people from that area of Africa right now, while we're getting our legs under us, maybe have to be screened much more thoroughly before they get on a plane. Very much so like Ellis Island. 200 and some odd years ago and 100 and some odd years ago. You couldn't come if you had pink eyes or you had to be quarantined until you were better, until you got into the country. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities.
Well, and there's a big scare, though, because when you raise those concerns and possibilities and questions about limiting travel or different screening, people immediately do scream about civil liberties and, targeting and profiling.
The most important thing our government does for us is keep us safe as citizens. That's their job. Quite frankly, it's their only real job. And fortunately, we have guys like Arthur who worry about our civil rights, but at this point, we got a much bigger problem. And if this virus spreads, this virus is deadly in almost most cases. And the more people have died in this outbreak than in all other outbreaks.
Fred, tell them about the machine you were telling me about in the green room. They could measure your body temperature.
I went to Taiwan back this last summer, and for reasons which now I understand why, I go walking through like you go through a metal detector. The next thing I went through, they took my body temperature, and it showed up on a big thing. It said 98.
I mean, Shannon, you're a constitutional scholar, really.
Exactly.
And I mean, I don't think people would think that it's out of order if you get screens physically, health-wise, at this period of time while we don't have control over this. If you have a 104 fever, you can't get on the plane to come to America. Sorry.
I thought it was very interesting, the Texas law that's on the books, that if you don't cooperate with this quarantine, like we have the family now, the way I read it, it lists the initial scan of it, it's a third-degree felony if you resist a quarantine. I would think a lot of states have similar laws on the books.
Well, I'm sure they do, and that's to stop an outbreak. I mean, I don't think it's overly intrusive to force these people to have to stay where they are for 21 days, given how dangerous
and then they're in their home, too. It's not like they put them in some... if you go to Ellis Island and you see where they actually quarantine the people, they were worse than jail cells. I mean, here, at least, look, you just got to stay home.
Every constitutional question is a balancing act. The state has a compelling interest to make sure that other people don't get sick.
Kills me when he says all these right things, all these correct things.
Yeah, well, even a blind...
Sorry, Shannon.
Even a blind girl gets a nut sometimes.
Well, it's something like a life and death threat that will often unite us in trying to find that balance. So, we thank you both.
Thank you very much for
having me.
And
we do like Arthur. You said you didn't like him. I can tell you do.
He's one of the few defense lawyers I'll actually talk to.
Good to see you both.
Thanks a lot.